Welcome to the Observe Day podcast, the show where we celebrate the days that matter. From holidays to meaningful observances, we bring you inspiring conversations, stories, and ideas to make each day count. Whether it's raising awareness, learning something new, or simply sparking joy, this is your space to explore the calendar in a whole new way. I'm your host, Wisdom Okonkwo, and I'm excited to share today's observance with you. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Observe Day podcast, where every awareness day sparks real world conversations. October is Global Diversity Awareness Month, a moment to reflect on how our differences make us stronger and how our inclusion makes a daily practice, not a yearly campaign. Our guest today, Dr. Thomas Becker, is an organizational psychologist, author, and leadership strategist with over 35 years of experience helping leaders create high-performing, human-centered workplaces. His book, Beyond the Diversity Wars, challenges today's polarized debates and introduces a more unifying idea, whole person appreciation. Instead of reducing people to labels, Dr. Becker helps teams reconnect with shared purpose, empathy, and trust. In this conversation, we'll unpack what cultural competence truly looks like, how leaders can go beyond checkboxes, and how to build organizations where diversity feels like belonging. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Thomas.
Thank you so much, Wisdom. It's good to be here.
Yeah, Dr. Becker, after decades working with leaders and teams, what personal or professional turning point led you to write Beyond the Diversity Wars?
Yeah, you might know this, Wisdom, but there's a great deal of polarization, not just in the United States, but really worldwide. Some of that's political, much of it's cultural. So that really caught my attention because the has gotten considerably worse from my observations over the last few years. And there's some data from the Pew Research Center that supports that. It's not just a matter of opinion, but people have moved further and further apart from each other. And of course, that's got implications for individuals, organizations, and society. So that really led me to start thinking about these ideas of where did that come from and what implications does that have for diversity, equity, and inclusion in organizations and, the notion of belonging and inclusion generally in society? Um, yeah, and then thinking about where do we go from here? I mean, it's one thing to recognize it, but what do you do about it? So, yeah, that's basically my motive for tackling this issue in a book.
Yeah, well, this month celebrates diversity on a global scale. From your perspective as an organizational psychologist, what does true cultural competence look like in today's interconnected workplaces?
Well, that's a great question, Wisdom. I think intercultural competence looks like what I'm calling the detente mindset and whole person appreciation, because to be, competent and working with people all over the world, you've got to see them much more than just a
Hello?
couple of check boxes and social identity. And I might be classified easily as a white male, but
Hello?
that tells you only a small amount about me, and that's the same true if somebody's a black female or somebody who might be gay or straight or at any point on a religious spectrum. Knowing a few broad facts about them is very limiting. So, I've started to think about identity, Wisdom, as existing more on a continuum, that rather than being, these discrete boxes that classify and categorize people in a very limited way. And that continuum looks like this. On one end, you've got these very narrow attributes of people that are, very legitimate parts of them, the way they think, the way they typically feel, um, their interests, what kind of music do they like? Um, what do they like to do for hobbies, etc. So these are almost idiosyncratic details about the person. And then on the other far extreme of that continuum of identity is our shared humanity. You and I, obviously, Wisdom, we just met and we know a little bit about each other. But one thing we can be sure is whatever differences might exist, we're both human beings. We
Yeah.
both have needs for existence. We need water, we need air, we've got needs for relationships. We would like to have meaningful love in our lives. We'd like to have friends that we can trust. And we've probably got a desire for personal growth to continue learning and becoming more of what we're capable of becoming. So that continuum, I think, provides a much richer way of looking at people and provides potential bridges that aren't there if all we do is think of each other as social identities.
Wow. Oh, I love that. When I was reading the intro, one of the terms I said while I read out the intro is the whole person appreciation. I'd love for you to explain the whole person appreciation concept.
Yeah, that's a great kind of transition into um, the whole idea about where we go from the polarization that we see today. Whole person appreciation to me is really tapping into that idea of the identity continuum and trying to understand people all along that continuum. So let me give you a good example. Let's say that you have two people. I'll just pick on politics because that's something that people here in the US are very divided about. Maybe somebody's uh, an extreme conservative. They've got certain beliefs about social issues, economic issues, and other things. And somebody else might be on the far liberal end of things, and they've got very different views on those same topics. Well, if the first interaction between those people is about those topics, it's going to be downhill from there. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
There's going to be no bridge, no bond, no way of interacting. But if we know a
yeah,
little bit more about each other, about who we are, even if it's something on, one end of the continuum might be music, let's say. And let's say the two people on opposite extremes happen to share a love of the same kind of music. I'm just pick jazz since I happen to like jazz.
yeah,
Well, that gives them an immediate connection and something to talk about. Who do you like best as a trumpet player? Dizzy Gillespie or Miles Davis? Do you think modern jazz is as good as classical jazz? There's a million things to talk about. Same thing, maybe if they share an interest in sports or anything that's, pretty idiosyncratic to them, their interests. Um, the same is true as if they start understanding each other as human beings. They're not just interested in seeing each other as I'm female. Those differences are real, and they're important to recognize that, those social identities are important because they're an important part of how people think about themselves and other people. It also captures history in that in almost every country, some groups have been discriminated against, have been
yeah,
treated unfairly. That's definitely
yeah.
true here in the US. And so I'm not saying ignore those social identities, but if that's all we're focusing on, we'll never get past that in order to form a more meaningful relationship and be able to cooperate in those areas where we need to in work.
Before we dive deeper, I'd love to invite you to join the Observe Day newsletter. Every week, I send you highlights of upcoming observances, creative ways to celebrate, and behind the scenes extras from the shows. It's the perfect way to stay inspired and never miss a meaningful moment. Sign up today at observeday.com/join. That is observeday.com/join. Now, let's get back to the conversation.
Or in our social lives.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. We have to, so we're not saying we have to look beyond just their identity and see people for who they are. I'm curious, how can leaders cultivate environments where differences are valued without creating division?
Yeah, leadership is almost the most important thing to facilitate what I'm calling a detente mindset. And this detente mindset and whole person appreciation are intricately related. What I mean by that is a detente mindset is simply the attitude of, I want to have a relationship with this person where we, at the very least, want to coexist. And I think a great example of this was back in the 1970s, President Jimmy Carter brought Anwar Sadat from Egypt and Menachem Begin from Israel together in the Maryland woods here in the U.S. at his a retreat called Camp David. And, Begin and Sadat really did not like each other personally. There was a great deal of animosity there. And their two countries had been at war, substantial violent conflict for years. And the idea of détente was simply, hey, we don't have to go out and have a beer together. We don't even have to like each other, but we want peace. We want peace for our people. We want to coexist. And so out of this meeting came the Camp David Accords, which holds today, which is remarkable when you think about the amount of conflict that's going on right
Yeah.
now. Um, both, well, in the Middle East for sure, as well as obviously a number of other areas. So this détente is a step towards not looking at people who differ from you in terms of their beliefs about certain things, and not classifying them as an enemy. We're not enemies just because we disagree. Uh,
Yeah.
there's common ground that may exist, and if we're people of goodwill, we can find that. Now, not everybody's, this is not a panacea. It's not going to work for all situations. I don't want to oversell this notion. Some
Yeah.
people, some groups perhaps, they're just looking for a fight. They don't want to get along. They've got their own agenda. It's kind of hopeless. But if you go into relationships with this détente mindset and a desire to truly understand and appreciate individuals, your chances of forming meaningful relationships, even under adverse circumstances when there's conflict, is greatly increased, I believe.
Wow. You call it the Dayton. Can you help me out with the word again? The Dayton. Hello?
Yes, détente mindset. So détente
Okay.
is DETENTE, mindset or attitude,
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that mindset.
of course.
You w- what does the science say about how inclusion or exclusion impact motivation, team performance, and trust at work?
Yeah, you've got a lot of great questions tonight. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think this dilemma is, from an evolutionary standpoint, human beings have a natural tendency to classify each other into us versus them. And at one point, I assumed that that was good for our species. There was a shortage of resources, of mates, and so on. So, you had to be pretty clear back
Yeah.
in the hunter gatherer days, who's
Yeah.
for me, who's against me, because it's a brutal world at that point. Well, it's not working for us so good anymore because we're not fighting with clubs or sticks or, our hands usually. We've got nuclear weapons, we've got guns, we've got tanks, and this us versus them perspective just is very dangerous.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think the détente mindset and a sincere desire to understand and appreciate other people for the purpose of at least coexistence and hopefully cooperation where that's possible is part of the solution.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, we a lot of persons when we talk about inclusion, the global diversity, it's
Yeah.
just okay. Let me check the box so people don't say that I'm not doing these things
Yeah.
right. For leaders who want to
Yes.
move from just slogans to actual substance, what are practical behaviors they can start modeling tomorrow to foster belonging and equity?
Yeah, well, the most important thing is to treat individuals as individuals rather than, representatives of a group, to demonstrate in your words and in your behavior as a leader that, bias and discrimination are not welcome here, that when it comes to in organizations, when it comes to hiring people, training, assigning individuals to jobs, promoting people, we're focused on truly focused on qualifications. Um, I think, the danger of something like the Global Diversity Awareness Month, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's a great thing because it allows us to celebrate and recognize the value of diverse cultures,
Yeah.
backgrounds, experiences, and so on. But if that's all it is, if it's just this annual event, then that doesn't permeate our day-to-day behavior and
Yeah.
decisions. And there's a danger that it just becomes, "Oh, okay, this is a thing we do, every October. We
Yeah.
celebrate differences." But if that doesn't, feed into our day-to-day actions, then, it's kind of a waste of time. If day to day we are making decisions on the basis of what is actually good for individuals. The best of all worlds is, hey, we're doing things as a company and as a society that are good for individuals, they're good for the company, they're good for the society, and it's good for the world. The beautiful thing about thinking, at the level of global diversity is it provides an opportunity to think of ourselves more broadly even than, I'm a citizen of the US or I'm a citizen of Nigeria or, you know,
Yeah.
I think of myself as, these boundaries. I think one of the beautiful things that came out of the space program, um, I remember this will tell you how old I am. I remember this actually from like the 1970s, late 60s, 1968 as a child. I remember actually watching the moon landing. It was
Yeah.
pretty
Wow.
spectacular. But,
Yeah.
you if you're in outer space and you're looking at the Earth, there's no boundaries drawn around countries at all. Those are
Yeah.
things that we made up as
Made
human
up.
beings. We
Yeah.
drew these lines. There's no lines when you look at the Earth. It's just one mass, 70% water, 30% land, and a whole lot of people running around trying to, survive on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, I think that the idea of global diversity is fantastic. And we need to try to bring that into the world. It's happening. I really believe this. It's happening almost automatically in some cases without people, making a conscious decision. I'll give you an example. My son started with two of his friends, started a digital marketing firm and, he just got married in Lisbon, Portugal, by the way, and his company moved to
Okay.
Portugal because they had a good tax structure or something like that.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, so every person in their organization is a contractor, and they are from all over the world, so they've got this digital marketing company. They've now got over 50 people working with and for them, and those people aren't all from the same country. They're not the same color. They're not the same gender. They're probably not the same sexual orientation. They differ in
Yeah.
every way, except they come together for the mutual goal of, hey, I want to do well with this company because, they treat me right. Obviously, there's a exchange of work for pay. And, that's just a great thing. So that automatically puts management in the position of, hey, we've got to think globally because our employees are from all over the place. We can't just think provincially about, hey, I'm a U.S. citizen. We only hire Americans, or we only, do things this way. They've got to take into consideration the environment and the climate of the countries in which they operate, the people that they interact with, and doing so in a way that's good for the business and good for the employees. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful, but there's a lot of work to be done, as you know, Wisdom.
Yeah. Huh. Diversity isn't just about race or gender. It's also culture, thought, and geography. What lessons have you seen from international or cross-cultural teams that others can learn from?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is if I had to pick one spot on that identity continuum that's most important internationally is that it's the broader end of the spectrum. That, hey, whatever our language differences are, the way we dress, um, the languages we speak, the food we like, the music we enjoy, we are all human beings. It's one thing to understand that conceptually, and it's another to truly appreciate that, to really see that, okay, we don't need, for example, we don't need a different theory of motivation to understand people in Nigeria versus the US versus England versus Arabia. It doesn't matter. The basic human motivations are the same processes exist. Now, that doesn't mean you can necessarily implement the same sort of, for example, human resource procedures, because that's going to differ for a variety of reasons in different countries. But understanding why people do what they do, understanding leadership and the important role that it plays in organizations and society, that all comes from the appreciation of, hey, we're human beings. Uh, the other end of the spectrum with those narrow, for example, interests and idiosyncrasies, it absolutely is important because that's how people know that you understand them. If you don't understand that somebody has in their family is going through something very difficult, you've got an
Yeah,
employee working for you. Let's say you're a manager, and you know that you don't know that they're going through a divorce or one of their children is very ill, or, if you don't know that, or you don't care, that's even worse. If you don't know that, you're missing a critical part of them that, impinges on them in the workplace. We don't have, just like we don't have boundaries around countries when you look them from outer space, people don't have boundaries around their work life and their personal life, at least not hard and fast boundaries. What happens in the workplace affects what's going on at home and vice versa. So, yeah, I really think being able to understand and facilitate uh, the growth and development of employees by recognizing the importance of that continuum is essential.
oh, thank you so much, Dr. Becker. Um, where can listeners learn more
It's my
about
pleasure.
your book and also connect with you?
Right. So I think there's two ways that people can best connect with me. One is I've got a website. It's thomasebecker.com. So no spaces, just
Okay.
ThomasEbecker.com. Another very easy way is I'm on LinkedIn. You can just do a search for Thomas E. Becker, and that'll take you right to my LinkedIn profile. I post blogs there, research papers, and other resource of interest to readers. So yeah, you can reach me on LinkedIn just by doing a search by Thomas E. Becker.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Dr. Becker, for the advice and for breaking down the whole idea of global diversity beyond just the holidays, but to making it a lifestyle and a daily practice. I will put a link mentioned in the description so that listeners can click and go directly to the site.
Thank you so much. And Wisdom, I know we only know each other on kind of a superficial level since we just met, but I thank you so much for having me on your podcast. And I wish you, your family, and those you care about the very best in this tumultuous world.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Becker. That means a lot to me.
That's it for today's episode of the Observe Day podcast. Thank you for spending your time with us as we explore today's observance. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and share it with a friend who'd love to celebrate life special days too. Don't forget to join the newsletter at observeday.com/join for more observance stories, tips, and updates. Until next time, keep finding meaning in every day.